Hey, what's going on, Game Leapers? This is Coach Ease, and in today's upload, we're going to be talking about the updated 12-12 tier list. And lots of these champions, where they are in the tiers, they've kind of taken me by surprise because I did not anticipate most of these champs to be as good or as bad as they have ended up to be. So if you want to know the best champions, guys, and the worst champions to play for the next week or so for the rest of 12-12, make sure you stick around for the whole video. And I'm also excited to introduce today's video sponsor, Buff, named after me. But yeah, Buff is an authorized Overwolf app, guys, with more than 5 million users that allows you to play and earn at the same time. So the more you play, the more buff points you will earn, which you can redeem for skins in so many games. We're talking Halo, PUBG, Valorant, and on top of all of that, you can spend your buff points on other cool things. So it might be Steam credits and even gaming hardware. So the way you use Buff is really simple. All you need to do is have Buff run in the background while you're playing, and you'll generate points automatically. So the app won't even affect your computer's performance or do anything sketchy. How good. And as you're listening to me talk, guys, there is a special Buff offer where you'll be getting an additional 70 points on the top of the 30 you get when you sign up with our referral code. So go ahead and receive your 100 extra buff points right now by downloading Buff from the description below. So we'll start by talking about the top lane tier list. Now for top lane in Bel'Veth tier, we have Darius and Jax. These two are the standout carries at the moment. Both of these in this new durability meta because they love extended fights. This is why they are flourishing at the moment. Now all the S tier champions, these are also champions who like extended fights, but also these are champions who benefited from last patch from the Balmy Cinder buff and all the tank mythic buffs. So we do have a few tanks in here, namely Ornn, Sejuani, Shen, Tahm Kench. These champions became a lot more powerful since last patch, and as long as your champion is one of these champions who can build Balmy Cinder, or one of the champions who likes playing against these champs, that's why Darius is so broken at the moment, because he destroys all of them, then you are in safekeeping. Now as far as low-key broken goes, we have Cassiopeia, Gragas, Heimerdinger, who got buffed this patch, Poppy, Rengar, and Tryndamere, and we will elaborate on these in maybe tomorrow's video. Just make sure, guys, you're very careful of picking the champions in the C tier. So some of these champions have lots of burst damage, like Akali, like Kennen. You might even consider Renekton or Vladimir to have burst damage. Just please be careful of picking a champion like Ryze or maybe Yasuo, because in the top lane at the moment, they get destroyed by pretty much every other champion above them in the tier list. So that was the top lane tier list. Now let's head to the mid lane and talk about the 4 champions in the Bel'Veth tier. So we have Ahri, Anivia, Kassadin, and Yone. Now for Ahri, one of the most consistent mid laners, blind pickable, does well into any team composition, and with any team composition, unreal champion still. Then we have Anivia because of her synergy with Liandra's Anguish. Pair this with her Glacial Storm, her ultimate ticking. She deals so much damage over time, which is really what the meta is about. Then we have Kassadin, and because so many mages are being picked at the moment, like attack damage champions, assassins, they're not as good as they once were, so Kassadin as a result, his value goes up a lot. And we also have Yone because, well, the durability meta, it allows Yone to get to the late game, which is when he can be as unstoppable as a champion like a Kassadin. Now as far as the S tier goes, we have a couple of maybe surprise inclusions. So Heimerdinger because of the buffs, and also Seraphine because of the buffs to her, and Seraphine with Liandra's Anguish, and because of the E buffs to the cooldown and to the slow and root duration. These have been crazy for her. Because AD carries are becoming more and more important the tankier the meta gets, a champion like Seraphine can empower them and protect them as well as anyone with Liandra's Anguish. And the best thing about having Liandra's as a Seraphine is your damage. They still have to be careful about just running into you and face tanking your abilities. Now as far as low-key broken in the mid lane, we have 3 champions. So we have Diana, Gragas, and Zillion. And just like I mentioned for the low-key broken champions in the top lane, we will elaborate on these 3 champions in a future video. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so you do not miss it. Now as far as the A tier goes, again, we have champions who scale very well. So we have Azir, we have Kayle, we have Malzahar, and then we have Veigar, who's kind of fallen from grace because of the Predator nerf this patch. He just has less power in the early to mid game. Late game, you still have as much, but this does mean in maybe a few more games, you're not going to hit that reliable level 16 and just take over a game. Just make sure, just like the top lane, guys, that you do be careful of picking champions with lots of burst damage. So we're talking Akali, Katarina, LeBlanc, Lissandra, Syndra, Talon, maybe Twisted Fate as well, Vex, and then Zed. These champions are really not liking this durability meta because it's so hard to assassinate people. And you guys know the drill by now. Even though Riot have tried to nerf Ryze in the last couple of patches, the champion is just still incredibly bad in solo queue across every single elo, so be very careful about locking in the Rune Mage. Now let's head into the jungle, guys, and as you can see in the Bel'Veth tier, we have 3 champions, Kayn, Volibear, and Wukong. Now for 2 of these champions, Kayn and Wukong, Conqueror-based champions, right, who really froth a durability meta because Kayn loves fights that are extended, and I'm really talking about Rast here, so the red Kayn, and also Wukong because of your Conqueror stacking, your low Q cooldown, and of course Divine Sunderer. You can deal so much damage, especially to champions who are building Balmy Cinder and then tank mythics because they have more HP, and one of those champions is indeed Volibear. So if you're still building Bruiser Volibear without a tank mythic, it is time to change it and to go Turbo Chem Tank. This champion with Chem Tank and Lucidity ability boots, the ability haste from both of these items, and Chemtank's mythic passive, they synergize so nicely, and for Volibear, your base damages are so high anyway, you don't need any more. This makes you very hard to kill, and you're still boasting a lot of the early game power, so you can get rolling. Now, as far as the S tier champions, not really many here, but we do have Diana, Kha'Zix, Kindred, Rammus, Rek'Sai, and Trundle. Kind of like the champions above them, these champions do well in extended fights and have very few weaknesses. Now, as far as the rest of the tier goes, there are lots of champions in B tier, but these champions aren't really OP, but they're not really terrible. But speaking of those terrible champions in C tier, again, it's just a bunch of champions who have a lot of burst, or just like going Gore Drinker. So we're talking Evelynn for burst, Graves with burst, J4 with Gore Drinker, Karthus with burst, of course. I mean, I guess Karthus does have a bit of DPS, but because fights are longer, you can just stall a Karthus out, especially if he dies quickly. Lee Sin, exactly the same thing as J4 with Gore Drinker, Nidalee burst damage. Poppy is here because Poppy in the top lane is a heck of a lot better than playing her in the jungle. Top lane, if you're going Balmy Cinder with Sunfire Aegis, something like that, you will just reap more rewards. And then we have Shaco. Even though he got adjusted this patch, it's actually just worse for it. Now, if you're playing AP Shaco with Leandri's Anguish, for sure I could put him in A tier, maybe even S tier, but for most Shaco players who are going attack damage, the champion is just straight up worse. Then we have Viego, who got nerfed in this patch, become a lot worse, like a 47-48% win rate, really big drop off. And then we have Xin Zhao, Gore Drinker champion, and Zed for burst damage. And then as far as the balance team, worst tier goes, we have Jungle Rise. Now let's head down to the bot lane, guys, and talk about the best AD carries, or carries as a bot laner. And in the Bel'Veth tier, we have two champions who aren't your typical AD carries, these being Seraphine and Tahm Kench. Now for Seraphine, like we've discussed, because of Leandri's Anguish and because of the buffs to this patch, super OP champion, whether you play her in the mid lane, like we talked about, or as an AP carry bot laner. Then we also have Tahm Kench because of the Balmy Cinder buff, and then because of the Tahm Kench buffs a couple of patches ago, to Tahm Kench's on hit in his passive, to his Q's damage, pair this with a Senna as a support, and you are one of the scariest combinations in the bot lane, which is why Tahm Kench and Senna, one of them, has been banned a heck of a lot at the moment in pro play. But for those of you who like playing those traditional AD carries, we have Twitch, and then we have Zeri. Both of these champions love a bit of lethal tempo, and they also love a bit of scaling. Once they get to the late game, they are so hard to stop. Even if Zeri has been nerfed a little bit this patch, her win rate only dropped by about 0.75-0.8%. She's still so good, and I mentioned in yesterday's video, she's banned in over 50% of games in high reloads because she is that broken. Now, as far as the S tier champions go, we have Kalista, Kog'Maw, and Vayne. What do these have in common with a Twitch and a Zeri? Lethal tempo. And because of how well these champions scale, particularly Kog'Maw and then Vayne, and because of the buffs in Season 12 to Kalista, these champions are your next best. Now, as far as the A and B tiers, well, we have Lucian, who's dropped quite a bit because of the base attack damage nerf. I was even close to putting him in C tier, so be very careful if you're picking Lucian 12-12. He's a lot worse off. Now, as far as the C tier champions go, these champions, well, they might scale kind of well. Like you might look at Aphelios, Ezreal, Jinx, Kai'Sa, all of these scale well. But here's the issue. They don't scale nearly as well as the other champions on this countdown, and their laning phase is just so weak. Their synergies with the best supports at the moment, they're really not that great either. And most of these champions, I mean, if we look at Kai'Sa, if we look at Xayah, even Aphelios, you might say, they love those engaged supports because they work with their CC, and their synergies are a lot better. But because those supports just aren't as good, like Leona's, like Nautilus's, like Thresh's, these AD carries go down in value. Just make sure you don't pick Ryze as a carry in the bot lane. And of course, the last role we have to talk about here, guys, this is the support role. And in the Bel'Veth tier, we have Janna. Despite getting nerfed this patch, her W and her E, these have really not stopped her from being a top tier support. Win rates are still insane across every single elo, so keep picking her. Then we have Renata Glass, kind of the same story. Been so good for so long, even though she has been nerfed kind of recently, still an amazing champion innately as well. Her kit is just too OP. And then we have Senna, who just like Renata and just like Janna, even though Senna has been nerfed, still performing at the highest level. Now, as far as the S tier champions, we have Amumu, who got buffed this patch, so your Q's mana cost going down, and also your ultimate's damage going up. This has brought Amumu support back into the meta, and his win rates, just like a lot of these champions across all elos, is super high. That's why he's an S tier along with Bard, Lulu, Seraphine, buff this patch, Taric, buff recently, Xerath, buff recently, and then Yuumi, who kind of got nerfed overall because of the heal in your E getting nerfed. Even if your passive got buffed, the heal in your E, that is the big issue here, but still such a good champion. Think about the best AD carries, Twitch, Zeri. The synergy is too good not to have Yuumi there. Now, as far as the rest of the champions go, we have Blitzcrank, who got buffed this patch. That's why he's moved from B tier into A tier, because landing a rocket grab is probably going to be fatal these days, so you have to be very careful playing against the Crank. And when he hits level 6, his ultimate doing more damage, he's now got that burst damage back to threaten enemy champions who he hooks. And apart from those champions, guys, it's really much of the same. Just be very careful about picking those champions in C tier. So Ashe, pretty much a pseudo support. Then we have Galio, kind of the same thing. Karma, who just doesn't really enjoy this meta at the moment. Same thing with Leona and Thresh. And as far as the balanced team tier goes, please do not pick Pantheon. Play him in the mid lane or top lane if you want to, a lot better in those roles. Same with Poppy, play her top lane, and then Ryze, well, just don't play Ryze full stop. So those are the tier list, guys, for 12, the updated versions. Let me know down below any thoughts, any questions, and until our next Season 12 upload, this has been Coach Cheese.